2022 Iranian military parade. Not just an ordinary show.
And reserve troop barracks, which shocked the world. The attack occurred while the official ceasefire between Israel and Gaza was still in effect. The attack occurred early in the morning local time. Iranian missiles launched from Iran's internal territory and eastern Syria hit a number of Israeli military facilities in Be'er Sheva, Negev to around Mona. Most of the victims died in their sleep, some were playing guitar, taking tests, and some had just uploaded stories. Ceasefire hits different. Israel initially thought their radar was malfunctioning because the missiles used by Iran were a new type that the military calls specialist missiles. Stealth missiles designed to come like an X. Quietly without asking permission, but destroying feelings. In an initial report, the Israeli Defense Ministry called this the biggest military disaster in the history of modern conflict. Matching or even surpassing the Hezbollah rocket attack in 2006. But what's hot is that this incident occurred when the IDF itself was claiming to support the peace process. Iranian sources said that they did not shoot randomly. This attack was a response to a small Israeli attack on Gaza 2 days earlier, which was carried out secretly without public announcement. They thought this was a ceasefire. In fact, what they did was a brain ceasefire, said the Iranian military spokesman while sipping saffron tea. Iranian satellites captured the movement of Israeli special forces who secretly entered the Gaza Strip. Several hours after the ceasefire agreement, Iran did not remain silent. Within 18 hours, they prepared high-precision missiles and attacked with precision. The only troops who survived were those who were in the underground military toilet. And when they came out, all they saw were the remains of uniforms and Croc sandals scattered around. The Israeli media was initially reluctant to report the actual number of casualties. However, civilian drones and hospital reports made it impossible to cover up everything. Israeli citizens panicked. The city of Tel Aviv was paralyzed for 12 hours. The Northern Military Center immediately announced full alert, and the Prime Minister immediately held an emergency cabinet meeting while blaming. Iran does not know the meaning of peace, but also please check who started the attack first. After the precision missile attack that killed the Israeli troops,
I want to bring in now Democratic Congressman Robert Garcia of California. He's the newly minted ranking member of the House Oversight Committee. Congratulations on that election, Congressman. I wonder if Leader Jeffries, as we continue watching him here on the floor, gave any of you a heads up about what this magic minute would actually become here.
Yeah, I mean, look, first, we're incredibly, obviously, proud of the leader. I've been in that chamber. We've all been with him there. He has been out at it, I think, for over 7 hours. And he's out there not just speaking against a horrific bill for the American public, but he's also giving and creating time for folks to flood these offices. Calls are going into members' offices. We understand there are people calling into some of these offices that you're all talking about from the Republican side. And he's really, I think, bringing life to important stories from across the country. A lot of us expected him to do something like this because he's that kind of a leader. But it's also really important for people to know that if this thing passes, 17 million people are going to likely lose their health care. Millions are going to lose their food assistance. ICE is going to be able to double the amount of detentions that they're doing across this country, targeting, as we all know, sometimes U.S. citizens and people with no due process. And
NBC's Gabe Gutierrez joins us from the White House. Also with us, New York Times chief White House correspondent and MSNBC political analyst Peter Baker, MSNBC political analyst and former Republican Congressman Carlos Curbelo of Florida, and former Democratic Congressman Max Rose of New York. Gabe, Leader Jeffries going for more than 5 hours now. What's the feeling at the White House? And talk to us about President Trump's role winning over those Republican holdouts last night.
Well, hi, Anna. Good morning. As if there was any doubt, President Trump certainly owns the Republican Party right now. That is the sentiment here at the White House. According to a senior White House official, the president spent much of the night on the phone with lawmakers trying to get this mega bill over the finish line. Now, currently, there is no Marine sentry outside the West Wing, indicating that the president is not in the Oval Office at this point. But there is a celebratory vibe here at the White House as they wait for this bill to pass. It'll be a very busy day here. The president said to me with Don Alexander later on today, we just heard that he's set to speak with Russian President Vladimir Putin any moment now, actually. And then he heads to Iowa later on tonight for the kickoff rally to celebrating America's 250th birthday next year. So he's going to Iowa for that. It's a very busy day here, but the president is in very good spirits, according to that senior White House official, after it became clear that he was able to muscle this bill through just in time for that self-imposed July 4th deadline on it.
Congressman Curbelo, I want you to listen to how Republican Derek Van Orden of Wisconsin defended supporting this bill.
Am I happy about everything? No. But there's a difference between compromise and capitulation. We're not capitulating, we're compromising. The President of the United States gave us an assignment. I'm a member of Congress and represent almost 800,000 Wisconsinites. Is that clear?
So he was one of many who didn't like this bill to begin with. Once it came back from the Senate, he's saying they didn't capitulate, but if the bill didn't change, there was no compromise. So what do you call that?
Well, Anna, what is clear is what Gabe said. I mean, this is all attributable to Donald Trump's influence and his power in the Republican Party. We know that there were senators who did not like this bill. They said it publicly. We know there are House members who have some very serious concerns. Yet the president's muscle is what got this through. This was a risky strategy. There were congressmen and senators who told the president they should pursue a two-bill approach. The president one shot, and despite some resistance in both chambers, he got it through. It's an impressive accomplishment, but a reminder that reconciliation is a double-edged sword.
What happened? Ay, nako guys, why, what happened? Why like
Double-edged sword. It is a good tool for the majority to push through their agenda, but politically, it tends to hurt the party that gets it done.
That's interesting when you say what could come in terms of consequences, and yet the president is taking a victory lap just moments ago, putting out this post on Truth Social. What a great night it was, one of the most consequential bills ever. The USA is the hottest country in the world by far. Congressman Rose, this vote went through this record vote-a-rama in the Senate side, one of the longest votes in modern history on the House side, just getting to this point before the final vote. But if it appears to be coming up short in terms of the Democratic efforts to stop this, what does that say about Democrats' strategy and ability to be a barrier?
Well, let's look at what Leader Jeffries is doing right now. Now, the rules of the House floor are very interesting in terms of decorum. You can't call another member ugly, but you can stand up there and vote to take away benefits from millions of people. So what Leader Jeffries is doing is Republican district by Republican district. He's not engaging in character assaults, but he is bringing up individual stories from their districts of hardworking people whose lives will be damaged as a consequence of this bill, who will lose food benefits, who will lose health care benefits. The individual cases of these members, fascinating. Think about a guy like Ryan McKenzie down in Pennsylvania 7. He won his district in 2024 by something like 4,000 votes. He's going to kick over 25,000 people off of their benefits just with 4,000 votes. He's going to kick over 25,000 people off of their benefits just with 4,000 votes. He's going to kick over 25,000 people off of their benefits just with 4,000 votes. He's going to kick over 25,000 people off of their benefits just with 4,000 votes. He's going to kick over 25,000 people off of their benefits just with 4,000 votes. He's going to kick over 25,000 people off of their benefits just with 4,000 votes. He's going to kick over 25,000 people off of their benefits just with 4,000 votes. He's going to kick over 25,000 people off of their benefits just with 4,000 votes. He's going to kick over 25,000 people off of their benefits just with 4,000 votes. He's going to kick over 25,000 people off of their benefits just with 4,000 votes. He's going to kick over 25,000 people off of their benefits just with 4,000 votes. He's going to kick over 25,000 this bill close to, more than 5 times his win margin. The political consequences for these members is going to be disastrous. And the candidate already challenging him, Ryan Croswell, a great Marine, incredible service record, is already bringing this fight to him on this very issue. So the Democrats' fight has only just begun.
I want to bring in NBC's Melanie Zanona joining us on Capitol Hill. I mean, Mel, to the point that we've already discussed, the potentially politically damaging impacts of this bill, how
Hi
did
guys, thank you
Republicans
for coming.
get everybody lined up to vote for it? It was a long night of whipping and arm twisting. Ultimately, though, they didn't change the bill whatsoever, and that was something that the GOP leadership was desperately trying to avoid, because had they changed a single word, even a punctuation mark in this bill, they would have needed to send it back to the Senate. So I'm told, instead, what a lot of these late-night conversations focused on, including a 1 a.m. phone call involving Trump and some of these holdouts, was about future actions they can take to address conservative priorities. Things like future executive action, and talk of another reconciliation bill down the line. There was also a lot of talk about what they said was aggressive implementation of some of the provisions in the bill. These conservatives particularly wanted some assurances that some of the rollbacks of clean energy tax credits would be implemented quickly and aggressively. They also wanted assurances about how some of these new Medicaid restrictions would be playing out. And so in the end, it was more of a venting session between these holdouts and conservatives. They asked a lot of questions, I'm told, but the White House, Trump, and other officials were really patient walking them through all of the provisions. We saw Trump turn up the heat a little bit last night, growing frustrated, tweeting about, what are you guys waiting for? It's time to move this on. This is ridiculous. Ultimately, though, they got the votes for the procedural vote, and we are anticipating that they'll be able to get the votes for final passage as well. So, Peter, President Trump, as we've discussed, met with Republican members yesterday. He was posting all night. He's back posting this morning. The vote hasn't happened yet, so clearly that's the extra pressure campaign he's putting on. What are you hearing about these efforts and the fact that he appears to be on track to meet that self-imposed deadline, which is never a given?
Yeah, he is on track to meet it. That's kind of important to him because he has missed so many other deadlines he has set so far in his second term. He wants to be able to demonstrate mastery. As Gabe said, he is the dominant force.
If you're thinking about changing your career, I really recommend you pick a career where you can change other people.
Hey folks, Eric Stackbeck here. Welcome to the WASP Newscast live stream. Coming to you very casual. As you can see, I'm on vacation. We're at the beach, my family and I, for some much needed trip. Man, it goes without saying, for such a time as... Remember, the Houthis are in Yemen, about 1,000 miles south of Israel, hugging the Red Sea coast. So this is not without precedent. If Iran does indeed have hypersonic missiles, and it seems that they don't, because you think they might have used some during the war.
Israel hopes to finalize a comprehensive truce and hostage deal before Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's trip to Washington, D.C. next week. That's the optimistic message from Jerusalem after sending Washington a positive response for the hostage for ceasefire deal now on the table. And awaiting a Hamas response. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
Multiple reports say that Israeli leaders are advancing major efforts to reach a hostage for ceasefire deal with Hamas in the days ahead of Prime Minister Netanyahu's White House meeting with President Trump on Monday. Israeli television reports that Netanyahu is, for the first time, willing to engage in talks over a comprehensive ceasefire and hostage release framework in Gaza that would see the release of all 50 remaining hostages, living and dead. The Prime Minister said that when the war is over, the hostages will be home and Hamas will be gone.
לא יהיה חמאס, לא יהיה חמאסטן, לא חוזרים לזה. הדבר הזה נגמר. אנחנו נשחרר את כל חטופינו. לא יהיה. באמת, איך אפשר להגיד את זה? זה שתי מטרות נוגדות. איזה שטויות. איזה שטויות. זה עובד ביחד, אנחנו נשלים את זה ביחד. בניגוד למה שאומרים, לא יכול, אי אפשר לעקור, אי אפשר אנחנו נחסל אותם עד יסוד.
Amid the optimism, officials caution that even if Hamas agrees to the framework in principle, it could still take time for the plan to be completed. There are still negotiations to be held over the release of Palestinian security prisoners in exchange for the hostages, the process of IDF withdrawal from parts of Gaza, and the entry of humanitarian aid. Israeli leaders confirmed that a deal could soon be reached.
Hamas still holds 50 of our hostages in crew captivity. The war can end tomorrow if it releases them and lays down its arms. We are serious in our will to reach a hostage deal and a ceasefire.
Ahead of their summit next Monday in Washington, Prime Minister Netanyahu and U.S. President Trump both sound serious about reaching a deal. The question now, is Hamas serious?
For the first time in months, there is true optimism Hamas will accept the terms of the Trump-pressured ceasefire deal to end the war in Gaza. ILTV's Shosh Bedrosian is in Tel Aviv with the details. Shosh, what is Hamas satisfied with, and what are the reported terms of this deal?
Sivan, Hamas is reportedly satisfied with the assurances that are currently in this proposal right now, and Israeli and American officials are expected to hear from Hamas within the next 24 hours regarding their response on this current proposal. Before the weekend, it is supposed to come in. Now, for the first time, American and Israeli officials have true optimism that a deal could be happening in the near future here, especially because there has been so much ongoing back and forth for the last few months about where it stands with a ceasefire and a hostage deal. Now, some assurances include that Israel would not renew fighting as long as negotiations over the ceasefire continue. And there's a guarantee that Trump would announce the agreement and serve as its official sponsor. Now, Israel has approved the necessary conditions for a ceasefire, a 60-day ceasefire. That's according to President Trump. He posted that on his Truth Social account on Wednesday. Now, I want to make it clear, there are two different ceasefire and hostage proposals that are being floated around right now. One of them is that 10 living hostages and 18 bodies would be released in 5 different phases over a 60-day ceasefire window. Or the second option we are currently hearing about is that 8 living hostages would be released on the first day of this 60-day ceasefire, and 2 more living hostages would be released on the 50th day of the ceasefire, in addition to 18 bodies as well. Now, we know that Israeli officials believe that 20 hostages are still alive in Hamas captivity, and a total of 50 of them are still in captivity at this time. We also know that 2 American hostages are still being held there as well. That includes Itai Chen and Omer Nutra. Now, it's also been reported that Hamas will not be doing these humiliating ceremonies that they have been doing in the past for handover ceremonies when it comes to releasing these hostages. And we are also hearing at this time an Israeli team of negotiators will likely be heading to Doha, Qatar for this weekend. Sivan?
Thank you, Shosh. Also, we are hearing the families of 2 hostages, Maxim Harkin and Bar Cooperstein. They decided to release for the first time a propaganda video of their sons seen in Hamas captivity in Gaza together. The video was initially released by Hamas a few months ago, but the family refused publication of the video thus far. Now, they've released it, with the men saying in the video that they are 30 meters underground and that they don't feel human, as the conditions are so dire and torturous. And joining me now to discuss all of this is retired Colonel Miri Eisen, Senior Fellow at the International Institute for Counterterrorism. Thank you so much, Miri, for being with us.
Sivan, always a pleasure.
Miri, why do you believe Prime Minister Netanyahu is now finally open, presumably, to a full ceasefire and comprehensive hostage deal ahead of his Washington trip? What changed?
What's wrong?
Are you still running misleading ads?
You guys, ceasefire and comprehensive hostage deal ahead of his Washington trip. What changed?
Why like this?
What changed is the situation of what we've always called the head of the octopus. Iran. Iran is the backer of the proxies, Iran as the supplier of the proxies. Iran, who fired horrific missiles also at Israel in those 12 days, but Iran that was put into a very different position in the aftermath of Israel's attack those 12 days and the American attack against the different nuclear sites. That is a huge difference. There was enormous Israeli backing. All sorts of people who do not support Prime Minister Netanyahu, who have been against him, who have been protesting against him, both during the war and before, came out in support of that attack. That gives wind to the Prime Minister. It shows that he has broader support to come about right now and do this. He still has to get through his own cabinet. There are voices in his own cabinet who say that they do not support such a deal. But I think that that broader sense of the support that Israelis have given to the Prime Minister, to the government in the actions against Iran, have given him the oomph, the capability to go through now with a very tough deal. It won't be a tough deal, but with the Hamas to get back the 50 hostages.
Now, how much pressure do you believe is being exerted by the U.S. and by President Trump himself on Israel to reach this agreement?
President Trump is very active, as he was quoted before, on his social media site, and he has tweeted, or I should say in Truth Social, as he puts it out, not only on the need to get to a ceasefire, the need to end the war. That's not the same thing, Sivan. We keep saying ceasefire. Ceasefire is not the end of the war. It's ceasefire, the need to get back the hostages, the need to get in humanitarian help. But the same thing is that the president has also talked and written about domestic issues in Israel, meaning the Prime Minister and the trial of the Prime Minister. And I say that because I think that there's a very strong relationship there, and that the president is very much not pressuring Prime Minister Netanyahu, but actually giving him a back to be able to try and do this deal. It's not a contra aspect, it's actually a support aspect. I think it's very strong. They're very different from the relationship that we saw before. It isn't about good, bad, right, wrong, but right now it's about getting to a deal. And I do think that it's very strongly both the pressure, but also the fact that it's done willingly on both sides.
Now, turning over to Hamas, what do you make of these reports now that they may be satisfied with the latest guarantees and may accept the deal? What's changed for them?
Sivan, that's my big challenge here. I want to be optimistic, but I'm the one who usually looks at things through the eyes of Hamas, and I find it in my own way not easier, it's not nice, but I can predict Hamas actions sometimes more certainly than the Israeli Prime Minister, let alone the U.S. President. And I say that because Hamas has been very consistent. And they say ceasefire, but what they're talking about is end of war. When we say ceasefire, we mean ceasefire. That's not the end of war. When Hamas says end of war, they mean not only ceasefire, hostages, yes, but with a very big price. The devil is in the details. But in addition to that, it's about leaving all of the Gaza Strip. And I haven't yet seen in the different leaks that are coming out from all over a clear definition that says that the ceasefires that Israel is stopping to fire, that we may do some realignment inside the Gaza Strip. I have not yet heard from Hamas a clear statement saying, and that means that we, Hamas, accept that the IDF is not leaving the Gaza Strip yet. And I say that because that's one of the gaps that I haven't yet heard, and I watch Hamas all of the time. For them, what has changed? They lost their Iranian backer. Not only that, but they lost Hezbollah, because Hezbollah, in not stepping up in those 12 days, also showed enormous weakness. And these definitely pressure that. There's a lot of pressure within the Muslim Sunni world for Hamas to get to a resolution. Everybody in the Muslim Sunni world wants the stability. So for Hamas right now, it's actually pressure from all over. There's a difference between Hamas in the Gaza Strip and the Hamas leaders that are outside of the Gaza Strip. And again, the negotiations are with the ones outside. So I take a deep breath. I am hopeful. I want to hope that Hamas right now is so pressured that they will take this step and do this ceasefire without what I call the end of war, meaning us leaving the Gaza Strip.
So as you mentioned, this key sticking point appears to be the IDF's phased withdrawal from Gaza. How critical is this issue from a security perspective? What compromise, if any, might be feasible here?
We showed before the quote of the Prime Minister just yesterday. He's been talking about it a lot over the last 24, 48 hours, that Hamas will be destroyed. In Hebrew, it's a different term that doesn't translate well into English because it's about really destroying Hamas's capabilities, those with the military capabilities, but it's also about Hamas not being able to rule in the Gaza Strip. It won't be Hamastan, is the way that the Prime Minister put it. The military can do so much, Sivan. They can attack the military terror capabilities, the different type of weapons, the different positions, the underground subterranean arena, again, trying to always avoid any possibility of hurting, let alone killing any of the Israeli hostages. So as I look at that right now, the military action is absolutely part of the pressure, but there isn't something different right now that can be done. I think that we can stop that kind of military pressure, but stay there. If we move back in its own way, it both doesn't pressure Hamas, and I say it sadly, I so want to be the person who says that we can just up and leave the Gaza Strip and nothing will change. It doesn't work that way. Having said that, at this stage, after, here we are almost 21 months later, big decisions are in the air, and I can hope that both the military and its pressure, together with everything else going on, will bring about a real deal.
Oh
I
no.
want to lose 20 kilos for the wedding. Do you know your fasting time?
Bring about a real deal.
Oh no.
Now, this heartbreaking video of the hostages, Bar Cooperstein and Maxim Herkin, was released after 636 days in captivity in Gaza. Might such footage impact public and political pressure on the Israeli government to finalize this deal?
Wow. Sivan, in a horrible way, I'm going to say right now, I actually don't think that that's what pressures us. I think that it's very important to see Baal, to see every single one of them and to hear their voices. At this stage, and we all need to understand that, it's not about our desire to get them back, it's about the devil in the details. Everybody still has to remember that we are dealing with the devil. We are negotiating, albeit not directly, with Hamas. They're the devil. And I need these young men to come back. I need them all to be here right now. I need the closure for every single one of the 50 families, for the 30 families that they know that their loved ones are dead, but they need to be back. This situation is impossible. But I think that domestically, in that sense, that's not what brings about the change. I think that what's bringing about the change is actually the military capability of what Israel did in Iran, the military pressure of what the IDF is doing against Hamas in the Gaza Strip, and combined with that international, and especially, of course, the U.S. pressure that is saying, you've done, now let's get to the deal.
God willing, all of the hostages come home soon. Thank you very much, Miri Eisen.
Always a pleasure.
When Israel is under fire, the world watches. But we act. Since 1901, Jewish National Fund USA has stood with our homeland. From the moment missiles rained down, we were there, caring for children of essential workers, turning shelters into sanctuaries, providing fire trucks and more. Israel is our family, and you always show up for family. To support the people of Israel for today and tomorrow, turn to the trusted name in philanthropy, Jewish National Fund USA.
Israel Bonds, the heartbeat of solidarity, the powerhouse of support. When the Israeli-Hamas war hit, Israel Bonds stood tall, proving we're more than just an investment, we're a lifeline. Israel Bonds pledges to ensure Israel thrives and flourishes. Investing in Israel Bonds isn't just a financial move, it's a declaration for resilience, strength, and a better future for Israel. Join us and let solidarity echo through generations.
The IDF announced that a soldier was killed and 8 others wounded in continuing fighting in northern Gaza. The fallen soldier was identified as Sergeant Yaniv Mikhailovich, 19 years old, from Rehovot. The army says there were 2 incidents. In the first, terrorists launched 2 RPG rockets at a building in which soldiers were stationed.
How are you?
2 soldiers were wounded. 20 minutes later, another tank missile was fired, this time at a tank operating to locate the terrorists from the earlier attack. Mikhailovich was killed, and the other soldiers in the tank were wounded.
Fine.
The army
Where are you
announced that
now?
it killed 2 terrorists, Musab Jilban and
Spaghetti.
Jihad Barbach, responsible for killing 7 soldiers last
Where
week
are
in
you
Khan
now?
Yunis when they threw an explosive device into the soldiers' Puma APC. They were targeted in an airstrike. Elsewhere in
Where
Gaza,
are you
IDF
now?
operations are ongoing. The army says it struck terror cells, underground routes, military structures, and sniper posts hitting some 150 targets over the past 24 hours. This after a terror cell in northern Gaza fired 2 rockets towards Israel that were intercepted by air defense. The IDF has reported the arrest of an Iranian-backed terror cell operating in Israeli-occupied southern Syria. The late-night bus shows continuing Iranian efforts to cause terror on the Israeli border. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
When the IDF moved troops into the southern Golan after the fall of the al-Assad regime last year, it was to ensure that terrorists do not fill the vacuum caused by the removal of Syrian government forces. The army remains deployed in a defensive posture to protect nearby Israeli communities in the Golan from attack. The IDF also conducts anti-terror acts when needed. The army said that the elite 504 intelligence unit interrogations led to the arrest of multiple members of an Iranian-backed terror cell. The unit questioned operatives held by Israel, which led to the bust in the nighttime arrest operation. During the operation, the IDF located weapons, including firearms and grenades. The officer in command said that Israel is working to ensure that residents of the Israeli side of the Golan Heights can sleep in peace. Israel cannot allow terror organizations or hostile elements to establish themselves in the area. With U.S. backing in recent weeks, Israel and representatives of the al-Shara government have held mediated talks about potential normalization of relations between the nations, who have been at war since Israel's creation.
Dito ako sa UAE,
If something
kabayan.
important was going to happen in your life
Si mother.
and no one warned you, would you forgive yourself?
Been at war since Israel's creation.
The United States is offering a new assessment of the recent strikes on Iran. According to the Pentagon, the joint U.S.-Israeli operation has significantly impacted Iran's nuclear program, delaying it by as much as 2 years.
Oh my God.
In a rare public estimate, the Pentagon has confirmed that Iran's nuclear program has been severely degraded by the coordinated strikes by the U.S. and Israel in recent weeks. Spokesman Sean Parnell told reporters the damage is substantial, setting Iran back by up to 2 years.
All of the conversations that we've
Saan
had
ka
since
sa US?
Operation Midnight
Kumusta
Hammer
naman ang
with
gera
our
dyan?
allies all around the
Ba
world,
yan?
certainly also in the region, you know, they say a couple of things. They share our sentiments
What
about the
happened?
degradation of Iran's nuclear program and the fact that we have degraded their program by 1 to 2 years. At least intel assessments inside the department assess that, and I think their intelligence shares that conclusion.
The strikes carried out in response to Iran's
Saan
nuclear
ka banda?
advancement targeted key facilities believed to be central to its uranium
Ano ko
enrichment
ba
and nuclear
ginigera ng
development.
ano dyan
The
sa
operation
inyo?
was described as swift, precise, and based on years of intelligence shared between the allies. President Trump, in an interview with Fox News earlier this week, took the rhetoric even further, claiming Iran's
Buti
nuclear
naman,
program had been
hindi
obliterated by the
apektado
mission. While experts say that may be an
Nakatakot na tong
overestimate,
mundo
they
ngayon.
agree the operation has dealt a
Kakatapusan
significant
na
blow
ng
to Iran's
ano.
ambitions. Still, questions remain about what comes next.
Ba't
Iran
lahat
has not
ng
confirmed
balita
the
yung
extent of the
nakikita
damage
ko
and has
dito,
vowed to continue what it
talo?
calls its peaceful nuclear energy efforts.
Ba
Analysts warn the regime may
yan?
seek to rebuild or retaliate, raising concerns of renewed conflict in the region. Meanwhile, U.S. and Israeli officials say they're closely monitoring Iranian movements and reinforcing deterrence in the Gulf, while the U.S. is also preparing for the possibility of resumed
Yun nga.
negotiations.
Lahat ng
A new
balita.
bipartisan bill in the U.S. Congress could give Israel access to America's most advanced stealth bombers. ILTV's Maya
Inumba na nga
Kaufman
daw
has more
yung
on this.
ano.
In a
Tel
rare show
Aviv.
of bipartisan unity, Democratic Congressman Josh Gottheimer of New Jersey and Republican Congressman Mike Lawler of
Buti
New York
naman,
have
maigi.
introduced legislation that could
Ganyan.
allow Israel to receive B-2 stealth bombers and GBU-57 bunker-busting bombs from the United
Praise God
States.
for that.
The bill, dubbed the Bunker Buster Act, would authorize President Donald Trump to make the transfer only if Iran is found to be continuing its pursuit of
Ang
nuclear
daming
weapons,
missile ang
despite recent
Iran.
U.S. airstrikes targeting key Iranian nuclear facilities in Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. If passed, the legislation would give Israel access to a level of operational capability
True.
never before shared with a foreign nation,
You're right.
though not permanent ownership of the bombers or weapons. As of 2024,
Spread
the
love.
U.S.
Iba
maintains
naman na
just
yung
24
sinasabi
active
mo.
B-2 aircraft, known
Wad.
for their long-range precision and stealth.
Spread love.
Congressman Gottheimer said the move is necessary to ensure Israel can defend itself and to prevent
Oh
Iran
no.
from rebuilding its
You're
nuclear
wrong
infrastructure.
grammar.
Lawler echoed that sentiment, emphasizing the bill's
Ay,
intent to
nako
deter
Lord.
Iran and bolster global security. The bill is
Ay,
still in its
nako,
early
ewan.
stages, but if approved, it could
Siguro
dramatically
sa mga
enhance
may
Israel's
love.
ability to act independently,
Sa mga may love,
shifting both
may
military
love.
and diplomatic dynamics across the Middle
Ikaw,
East.
yung may love mo dyan, siguro taga dyan na
In the
pangasawa
UK,
mo.
Parliament voted to ban a pro-Palestinian activist group and declare them a terror group. Protests have erupted against the ban on the group Palestine Action that aims to disrupt operations of weapons manufacturers supplying the Israeli army. More from ILTV's
Ay,
Hannah
nako.
UK lawmakers
Sana
voted
lang.
overwhelmingly in favor of the
Walang
measures that
pera,
label
walang love.
Palestine Action a terrorist group, with the ban on the group due to go into effect in the coming days.
The eyes to the right were 385, the nose to the left, 26. So the eyes
Pilipino
have
pa,
it,
maraming
the
jowa
eyes
yan.
have it. Unlock.
The action in Parliament came after two Palestine Action activists broke into Britain's largest airbase in central England,
Ambot lang
damaging
dong.
two military aircraft.
Ambot
The
lang
group
ba?
said the action was carried out to disrupt operations of weapons
Ambot.
manufacturers supplying the Israeli army. If the ban goes into
Ambot
effect, it would be the
lang.
first time in UK history that a direct action protest group has been labeled under anti-terror laws. The move in Parliament sparked protests outside the Prime Minister's residence on Downing Street in London. A full ban on Palestine Action means that it would be illegal
Ay,
under
ewan
UK
ko
law
lang.
to be a member of the group or
Di
support their
natin
actions,
alam.
placing them on par with other terrorist organizations like the Islamic State or Al-Qaeda.
Diyan ka na naman. Basta kabayan talaga ng bobola.
Against Iran,
Ano
Rising
yun?
Lion? The answer comes directly
Si
from
kabayan.
You're looking at a military operation named by
Si
If I look at,
kabayan.
let's say, a famous celebrity,
Ah,
then you're
famous. Walang
always, you will be
famous.
always the son.
named by God. 3,000 years ago, Balaam couldn't curse Israel,
Spaghetti
so he spoke those
paraba.
words instead. Today, this very prophecy has come to fruition. In Hebrew,
Siguro spaghetti yung
Am-Kelevi
pangalan ng
means a lion
napangasawa
nation.
mo.
The same
Kasi
words chosen for
spaghetti
this
yung
operation.
ano.
Today, as Israel faces threats to its very survival, we witness the
Ay,
ancient words
nako.
fulfilled. A people rising like a lion, not in aggression, but in the God-given right to defend their land.
Ay, nako.
Pray for peace.
Dagdagan mo pa yung bola.
Find wisdom in these prophetic
Dalawang bola pa. Oh
Now let's
no.
take a look at the
Ilang
weather.
taon ka na daw, Spag? Kaya nakalimutan na
Clear
ni
skies are
ano.
expected around most of the country tonight,
Tinatanong
with
mo kung
temperatures
ilang
reaching
taon
lows
ka
of
na.
22 degrees Celsius or 73 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see sunny skies alongside hot temperatures, seeing highs of 33 degrees Celsius or 91 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a wrap for today's
Manood,
news. For the latest
ano,
updates from
makinig
Israel
ka
and all
nga.
your
Baka,
devices, be sure to follow our
ang
ILTV
bata-bata
channels
mo
and
pa.
our new live channel, and you can also
Ba
catch
yan?
us on Screen IL with 24/7 live coverage. Stay informed of the latest news straight from the heart of
Bata-bata mo
Israel.
pa.
I'm Sivan Raviv. Be well, be safe, and thank you so much for watching.
Spaghetti ricos. Ay, naku, Lord, ano kaya mangyayari sa ano to? Tel Aviv? Videos new, guys. 28 minutes, guys.
For the first time in months, there is true optimism Hamas will accept the terms of the Trump-pressured ceasefire deal to end the war in Gaza. ILTV's Shosh Bedrosian is in Tel Aviv with the details. Shosh, what is Hamas satisfied with, and what are the reported
Saan ba
terms
tong
of
si
the deal?
Hamas? Laging siya ang ano.
Sivan, Hamas is reportedly satisfied with the assurances that are currently in this proposal right now, and is
Security. Oh my God. Yes. Igurot ako, hindi ako Ilocano.
Welcome to ILTV Security Brief. I'm Caleb Ben David. Each week, we focus on the latest developments and security and defense relating to Israel and the Middle East, impacting on this region and beyond. And we
Igorot
start with our
ako,
top
hindi ako
items of the past
Ilocana.
week.
Ano ka ba?
Prime Minister Netanyahu says new opportunities have opened to reach a Gaza agreement ahead of a visit to Washington to meet with
Ikaw
President
ba?
Trump
Taga saan ka
and
sa
hopefully
Pinas?
seal a deal. The U.S. proposal would see Hamas free 10 living hostages and the remains of 18 more during a 60-day ceasefire. The IDF boosts its operations across
Bakit
Gaza
naman?
ahead of a possible truce, with the
Bakit
troops
naman
seizing control of
nakalimutan
new
mo na?
areas in the northern strip and eliminating hundreds of
Why?
Hamas fighters. Sergeant Yaniv Mikhailovich becomes the
Huh?
latest casualty killed in combat, raising the number of fallen IDF soldiers during the Gaza operation.
Ay nako, baka buti nga marunong ka pa magtagalog na. Baka diyan ka lumaki sa US.
U.S. and Israeli intelligence officials claim Iran's nuclear program was set back for years by their airstrikes.
Hindi nga ako Ilocano. Pero marunong ako mag-Ilocano. Igorot ako.
Uranium enrichment in a matter of months. But the U.S. and Iran
Tagalog,
say it is
alam
too soon to
mo.
renew talks towards a new nuclear deal.
Ay nako,
This is how I managed to go from an average-looking 45-year-old to someone that looks 10 years younger. This is grass-fed beef
Ano
tallow.
ba naman nangyari sa Iran?
President Trump lifts most U.S. sanctions on
Tuturuan
Syria
kita bukas
and
pag
reports its
ano,
government is holding
mag-live
talks to
ako.
establish security ties with
Anong
Israel.
oras na dyan sa inyo?
Cross-border operation, IDF troops
Dito ako sa
operating in southern Syria,
UAE.
arrest members of an
Hindi
Iranian-backed
ako
terrorist
nakaayos ngayon. Ano ka ba?
enforcement
Bukas
body comprising the
sa work,
police,
magla-live
SHIELD,
ako,
and
ha?
IDF will be set up to counter violence by extremist settler elements following assaults on soldiers.
Ano ba talagang pangalan mo? Bakit spaghetti ang nilagay mo dyan? Siguro jowa mo yung si spaghetti. Sana all, hapon na ay tanghali.
Israel emerged victorious from its 12-day war with Iran. But in the wake of
Matutulog
that
na
victory,
ako. Naantay ko lang matapos
faces
tong
some
news.
difficult choices ahead
10
as it
minutes
weighs how to
matulog
keep
na
Iran
ako. Kaya may
from
pasok nga ako
rebuilding its
bukas.
nuclear
Kita na lang
program.
tayo bukas.
Whether to accept
Madaling
a
araw na pag
ceasefire deal with
mag-live ako.
Hamas that would free some or
Ay,
all of the
naantok
remaining
ka pa.
hostages in Gaza, and if it should reach an agreement with Syria on new
O,
security
kasama na ang
arrangements in the
Syria.
north.
Ano ba?
Now,
Ano
one
ba yan?
key element in all of these issues is the
Ano
involvement
ba
and the positions of
yan?
the United
Nangyayari.
States. Prime Minister Netanyahu is meeting President Trump in Washington next week to clarify those matters. But how
Ay,
much
nako.
will Israel be guided
Ano naman?
by America's Mideast policy concerns going forward? In the aftermath of the Iran
Thank
war, is
you.
President Trump the one calling the shots
10
for
minutes
Israel in the region?
matutulog na
Here's
ako.
President
Ano,
Trump's press
spaghetti.
secretary
Sabihin mo muna yung
setting
tunay
the
mong
scene
pangalan.
for next week's meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu.
This administration is in constant
Lola mo
communication
ako, ah.
with Israeli leadership, and the president
I'm
himself
your
speaks
Lola
frequently,
now.
as you know, to Prime Minister Netanyahu. But this has been a priority for the president since he took office to end this brutal war in
Saan
Gaza.
tayo?
It is
Starting
because
tayo
of this
ng
president that humanitarian aid is being brought into
You're
the region.
naughty. Ikaw, ah.
It's heartbreaking to see the images that have come out
Tayo
from
na ang
both Israel
magigera, ganon.
and Gaza throughout this war. And
Niloloko
the
mo
president wants
talaga
to see it,
ako.
and he
Ano ka
wants
ba?
to save lives. And
Naantok na ako.
however,
Baka
the main
managinip
priority
na
for
ako
the
ng
president
gera.
also remains to bring all of the
Wag
hostages
naman.
home out of Gaza.
And joining us now for more in studio
Sinisip
is
na ako sa'yo.
Ambassador Michael Oren, the former Israeli ambassador to the United States. And
Anong
Ambassador
pangalan mo,
Michael, thank you for
spaghetti?
joining us on ILTV.
Good to be with you, Khaled, as always.
And let me just start by asking you about the chances for this hostage deal next week. We've heard the outlines, the conditions of it. How close do you think we are to that?
Well, I think we're very close on the American and Israeli side. The question is, are we close on the Hamas side? And that's always going to be, the stumbling block.
Sabihin mo ng pangalan mo,
Because
ka 8
Israel can agree
minutes
to
na lang,
a
mag-end
60,
na ako ng
78
live.
ceasefire, get a certain number of hostages back.
Guys,
Israel can even
thank
release
you.
Palestinian prisoners from our jail. People have been sent to prison for terrorist attacks. The big question is, Hamas is going to want to see an end of the war.
Tapos na,
And the end of
ano,
war, Hamas
nagkaaway
comes out on
tayo,
top. It
ganon.
declares victory. It begins
Sa
to
ano,
reorganize the arm.
panaginip.
Ultimately, it'll take over the Gaza Strip again. And that is obviously not in the interest of the state of Israel, certainly not in the interest, excuse me, of the prime minister. And Israel is always going to want to have the
Siguro
option
paborito mong
to renew the
spaghetti,
fight
pareho na
against Hamas
tayo, ganon.
once it comes out of that tunnel.
Lutuan
Let's
mo
talk
nga
about
ako.
that because, as you said, Israel has agreed more or less has agreed to the terms of the sort of Witkoff proposal for the 60-day
Ay, naku,
ceasefire.
Lord.
That includes
Tawarin mo si
negotiations toward
spaghetti.
permanent truce, more
Kasalanan.
challenging for Israel, more problematic. But what kind of
Kasalanan ka
truce,
daw,
permanent
spaghetti.
ceasefire you think
Nagluto
Israel
ko na lang
could
kayo ng
agree
spaghetti
to
doon si
going
padala mo
Israel would
dito.
agree to the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip, no more guns, no more rockets, and the exile of Hamas leaders from the Gaza Strip.
Diba?
And the rest you begin to, dealing with the reorganizing the education of Palestinian children so they're not educated to kill Jews from age 2 onward, and rebuilding the destruction. So that I think Israel could live with. What impels Hamas to agree to such a thing? Now, does President Trump, whose hand has been greatly strengthened after American intervention in Iran, can he have the type of leverage on Qataris and others who support Hamas to force them to agree to this? Does Prime Minister Netanyahu, whose political position has been strengthened by Israel's victory over Iran, really he have the ability to stand up to people in his own
Really?
Ministers
Okay.
Ben Gvir and Smotrich, who are going to oppose this ceasefire deal?
Ikaw na ang, ikaw na ang
But as you said,
bida.
President Trump
Hindi
put
na
pressure
ako.
on Hamas. He could also put pressure on Israel, perhaps, to
Ikaw na ang
agree to some
bida,
terms that may be
spaghetti.
problematic. Certainly for Prime Minister Netanyahu and his government, you said, going forward security concerns. How much is President
Siguro yung
Trump
jowa
now
mo
calling the
spaghetti,
shots,
tapos ikaw
so to
si
speak,
Mr.
literally and
Ritos.
figuratively, both
Ano,
for
tell
Israel
me the
and for
truth.
general in the region?
I'm laughing, but it's kind of a
I can't
sardonic
see your
laugh. And
message.
I'm often asked on the Israeli news, are we now the 51st state? Or are we Puerto Rico, Alas? I mean, what
Ay
degree of
nako,
sovereignty
5
do we really
minutes na
have?
lang,
And the
Mr.
fact of the matter is, President Biden
Ritos.
once
Mr.
upon a time
Ritos
said,
na
don't.
lang.
And
Kaya
everybody
alam
did.
kong jowa mo yan
Israel
sa
did,
ano,
Iranians did,
spag.
Palestinians did.
Hi,
This
Gary
president says, don't.
Johnny. How are you?
And there really has been almost nobody who's been willing to do
Where
it.
are you from,
Possible
Gary?
Putin and Russia. But certainly not Israel, and certainly
Wala
Putin's not defended
talaga
the
ako,
United States the
jowa.
way Israel is. So I think much of our latitude
Really?
has been constricted in this relationship with this
Naniniwala
president
nga
for
ako
good
sa'yo
and for
para
bad. I can imagine a situation, this has happened in the past in our
naniniwala na
diplomacy,
sila.
where the president says to Prime Minister Netanyahu, I want you to do this, it's going to be very hard. And Prime Minister Netanyahu will say to the president, well, why don't you make it public?
Hello
Go back to
from
my
New
own government and say, what can I do?
York.
The
Thank
president
you for
forced my hand.
coming.
By the way, that is just what Begin did in Camp David with Jimmy Carter back in 1979.
What are you doing right now, Gary?
Remove all the forces, all of Israelis from Sinai. And actually, Foreign Minister Moshe Dayan went to the President Carter and said, listen, you
Man,
gotta
si
come out and say
Donald
publicly,
Trump.
if you
Ano
don't get out of
nangyari
Sinai,
kay
I'm gonna cut
Donald
off American
Trump?
aid. So Begin can go home and tell his government, what can I do? The President forced my hand.
Thank you,
That
Gary,
has a
for
certain role in
coming.
diplomacy. And who knows, maybe Netanyahu can avail
Oh
himself of
no,
that.
why? Why like this?
Of course, this bleeds into other important issues, such as, for example, Iran moving forward.
I'm
But
so
take a step back. You wrote a
sleepy, but I
piece,
need to
for
finish
the,
my
Hebrew
live,
Israeli
then
media,
I'm
actually
gonna say
for
bye-bye
Wired
to
Studio we're
everyone,
using,
then
which
I
talked
will
about
go
how
to work
Israel says to
tomorrow,
start
then I'll
transforming
make
what
like
have been mainly its tactics
Israel
in
waste
Gaza,
Gaza.
in Iran, and
Here's
security
to
matters
the
into more of a
free
strategy. Could you just
hostages.
explain
Oh my
what you mean by that?
gosh.
Well, since 1948,
What is
our
this
tactic has been our
happening?
strategy, which means that
I'm
every
old
couple
na
of years,
nga.
an
Ano
enemy's
ka
going to try to
ba?
destroy us.
Thank
We're
you
going to
so
hit
much,
that enemy
Gary.
hard and convince them that just
I
trying
have
to
3
destroy us
minutes
is not a
more,
good idea.
Gary.
And in between these battles, these wars, we will develop our society. The other side stagnates, but we have developed one of the most advanced nation states in the world. And that's been the case since 1948. Now, for the first time, I believe there's a chance to actually make our strategy, which is we win a war.
Basta kaya pa. Anong kaya? Anong kaya mo?
A credible military threat on the table. It could be an American threat, an Israeli threat, or an American-Israeli threat. If the Iranians try to rebuild Fordo, for example, it's going to elicit a military
Ang
response.
dami mong alam
That opens the
talaga,
door
ano,
to peace between Israel and Lebanon. Lebanon gets sovereignty. Peace between Israel and Syria. Peace between other countries in the Middle East and perhaps Muslim countries outside the Middle East.
Ay,
And the
nako.
entire Middle East changes. So all of a sudden, what was a tactical strategy by Israel
Umuwi ka na ng
1948 then
Pinas
becomes a
kasi
strategy.
Pinas lang
That
ang
really hangs in the balance
ililigtas
right
daw.
now. And much
Alam mo
will
ba yun?
depend on this meeting between the Prime Minister and the President on Monday.
Nasa Biblia yun.
Hopefully, they will determine what constitutes a violation of the ceasefire. Is it one brick on Fordo, or is it attempt to rebuild Iran's missile ballistic capabilities? And if so, what will be the U.S.-Israel response? And that's the key, I think, to
2
the
minutes,
entire transformation
guys.
right now.
Ano ba nangyari kay Donald Trump?
Branded and lovely to use. I've got 200. And that's the key, I think, to the entire transformation right now, making our strategy our strategy.
Well, let's take another case that you raised, for example, Syria. Because
Next year pa matapos ang contract ko.
Negotiations, perhaps I guess indirect at this stage, between Israel and Syria to try to establish either some kind of treaty or a new security arrangements. There are those in Israel that are saying or
nakita mo sa ano ko, sa video ko sa short videos.
Can be trusted. I mean, how do you see going forward? How Israel should proceed on that, taking into account what you just said?
Cautiously, and I would certainly take the Golan Heights off the table.
Nag-ipon ka na para
Cautiously, not because the
bilhan mo na ako
regime
ng
of Shara is
ticket.
going to betray us in some way. The question is whether it can hold Syria together.
Ay, naku,
Syria
Lord.
has always been held together by a preponderance of brutal central force. That's what the Assads did. You know, if you're not with me, I'm going to kill you. And the minute that brutal central force is weakened, Syria begins to unravel into various ethnic groups, other religious groups, ISIS. And the question is, we're making a deal with this particular leader, Shara. Does he have that ability to hold Syria together? And okay, let's experiment. I think what's on the table is a non-belligerency treaty, which is a very good treaty to start with. We started that with Egypt, and let's experiment. Let's see how well he can survive.
And let's take another key element here that you also raised, the question of Saudi Arabia, which has made some demands, puts some conditions, at least publicly, we don't know, in private discussions, in terms of establishing relations with Israel. They want to see a political horizon for a Palestinian state. How much flexibility do you think there is there to reach some kind of arrangement with Saudi Arabia, even to formally bring it into the Abraham?
Tapusin ko lang
First, we have to stop fighting in Gaza.
sino
Somebody's
ba
want to negotiate with us, and we're still fighting in Gaza.
Netanyahu,
Second, have talked about a pathway
si
to a
Donald
Palestinian
Trump,
state, a P word. And they're very careful about that.
Khamenei,
Because they know you create a Palestinian
sinerge
state
ko na
tomorrow
to
in Judea, Samaria, the West Bank, it's going to fall to Hamas
Na-download
and
ko
take down
din.
Jordan, take down half the Gulf. They're not that foolish. But even though they're not a democracy, they have public opinion. They need to assuage their public opinion. And I would hope that the Israeli
Bukas,
government
kapag
would
nasa
say,
work
okay,
na
we'll discuss a
ako.
pathway. What is a pathway? It's a thing with
I'll make
travel.
live tomorrow
Doesn't lead
when
anywhere.
I go to my
I
work,
don't know if
guys.
this current Israeli government is capable of doing that, but another Israeli government may be able to do that. And yes,
Okay,
we could
okay,
embark on
yalla.
a serious
Good night,
peace process
everyone.
with the Saudis.
I just finished this. Guys,
Ironically,
thank you for
our victory over
coming.
Iran
It's more than an
takes away some of the
hour.
incentive for the Saudis to make
I
peace
just
with us. It was
finished
always
this
the
because I
common
need
threat
to
we
check
faced
the
from Iran.
people.
We have to see how that plays out.
And what about the
Sino ba
prospects
to?
of even beyond that, or maybe
yung mga
of a
ano.
Middle East NATO that's often been talked about, one that
Security
would
brief.
bring together the moderate Arab nations and maybe include Israel, but also may put some limitations on Israel in order to become part of such an alliance.
This idea goes back,
I don't know
believe it or not, to the early
yet.
1950s.
Maybe
Middle
tomorrow
East
I'll
veto,
check.
it was called. And I've always been against it. I always think that we get all the benefits of having
Against it, because many people in Israel
Sino
or
to?
have said that this could be a
Truth.
game changer for the region.
Let it be a game changer for the region, but not for Israel. I think that we get all the benefits of having a NATO-like arrangement with the United States without having our hands tied at any time. We have to preserve our maneuverability and our sovereignty.
All right. I want to move to another item which speaks to some of the issues that actually we have been discussing now. Now, the war with Iran saw the first use in combat of the 30,000-pound GBU-57 bunker buster bombs dropped by
Bukas
the
nga.
B-2 stealth fighters,
Diba?
fighter jets that are big enough to carry that massive ordnance. But Israel has neither of those weapons and had to rely on the U.S. to carry out those strikes on Iran's underground nuclear facilities. But could that situation change in the near future? Our Mayan Hoffman has more on that story.
Well, Colin, I'm standing here right near the wall of the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem, where you know that a new bipartisan bill in Congress was moved forward last night that can mark a major shift in American military policy. Democratic Congressman Josh Gothenheimer, he's from New Jersey, and Republican Congressman Mike Lawler, who is from New York, introduced a piece of legislation together last night that would allow Israel to receive the B-2 stealth bombers and the bunker-busting bombs that belong only to the United States. Now, they put through this legislation legislation. They're calling it the Bunker Buster Act. And it will
Bunker.
authorize U.S. President Donald Trump to make a transfer of the equipment in the event that Iran decided to move forward with its nuclear program. Now, keep in mind, this is the same type of equipment that the U.S. used on its own just recently in Iran when it attacked the Fordo nuclear facility. That's the largest facility in Iran, and it was the deepest underground. If the legislation is passed, it would give Israel access to something that no other country has had access to, no other foreign country. The idea, according to the Congress people, is to make sure that Israel can defend itself against Iran if it decides to move forward with its program. The bill is in its early stages, so of course we're going to have to keep watching it. Now, back to you.
Back
Everything you need with the. So of course we're going to have to keep watching it. Now, back to you.
Michael, we talk about some of these weapons deals as being game changers in the Middle East. That would certainly be a big one.
alam ko na. Memorize ko.
Ambassador, you've had a role in this.
Well, going back, an article I wrote for Ynet last week told the story of how, almost for 15 years now, I've been trying to convince the United States under various administrations to either sell us a B-1, B-2, or even a B-25, B-52, or lease us one, or even let one of our air crews train on one. This was first made by me to the Obama administration. They got a hard no from them. Made again during the Trump years.
Let me ask you, why? Why a hard no to this, for Israel having this particular weaponry?
Well, President Obama wanted to reach a nuclear deal with the Iranians. He didn't want us to preempt that deal by bombing them with a bunker buster bomb. Under the Trump years, even after President Trump withdrew from the Iranian nuclear deal in 2018, I renewed the request. The response I got was, "This is very interesting. We're going to explore it," but Trump didn't win re-election, and then the Biden people came in. So this is an idea that's gone back, first in my tenure, has gone back a decade and a half. And that now it's being raised in a bipartisan way in Congress, to me, is a great source of fulfillment and vindication. It would be, there's a historic commitment by Congress called QME, Qualitative Military Edge, which says the following: that the United States promises to enable Israel to defend itself by itself against any Middle Eastern threat or any combination of Middle Eastern threats. Now, obviously, we didn't have that ability during this last round. We had to rely on the United States to defend us against one Middle Eastern threat, against Iran. So giving us or purchasing or enabling us to lease or train on the B-2 would be upholding the historic commitment under QME.
But let me ask you, why there's talk about not even selling the weapons, but in sense leasing them. So why is that? Why not just simply sell this?
Well, the answer I got, from successive administrations was the Americans don't have a lot of them. They only have about 18, 19 of them. So they don't have a big sort of backlog of these things. So maybe we can lease one, even part-time, but certainly let our crew train on one. So should a B-2 become available, a used B-2 lot, we will buy one, and we'll have a true crew to be ready to fly it.
Right. Now, President Trump has said that if Iran, if there's signs that Iran is moving again towards enrichment, towards a nuclear weapons capability, that there would be action on it. At the same time, we know that there are elements within his support and his base are not happy with the U.S. acting. Does this provide perhaps one option for President Trump to counter the Iran threat by letting basically, as Winston Churchill once said, give us the tools and we'll finish the job? Giving Israel the tools, and therefore it's really Israel's responsibility and risk in order to take out an Iran.
But in addition to sort of appeasing that segment of the White House, which is isolationist, it doesn't want to get dragged into another Middle Eastern war, they say, it also sends, giving us that B-2 capability will send an unequivocal message to the Iranians, which is, don't you dare.
Don't you dare. Now, but what kind of impact, just maybe some of the hesitations, is this specifically for the Iran threat, but how much leverage would this give Israel an advantage over simply every other military in the region? And you can imagine countries that are not, say, outright enemies of Israel, but countries like Turkey or Saudi
Arabia would respond to this really quantitative leap for Israel in its technology.
But going back to the QME, that has been America's commitment now for several decades. And so all of our friends in the Middle East and some of our frenemies in the Middle East understand that America is committed to ensure that we do have that technological edge. We do have the military edge all the time. And it's interesting, think of what that commitment says. It's not just against one Middle Eastern adversary, but a combination of Middle Eastern adversaries. That's a huge, huge military advantage.
Right. I want to just go back to talking about how bring all these elements together and how much you think in of your years of observing the region, we are really moving towards a kind of new era in the Middle East. What we've seen, the change with Iran, what's happened now in Syria, totally unprecedented developments. The sea change in Saudi Arabia, maybe even a country like Qatar now, after having their attacks on against their soil by Iran. How much really we are now in an era which, I hate to use the expression New Middle East, which lost a lot of currency in the Oslo Accords, but how much that we are now on the...
I'll quote an eminent source, my cab driver, who says we're not living during historical times, we're living during biblical times.
Biblical
times. And it could be
that could be good or bad, Mike.
But here, it's, yes, everything hangs in the balance. But I want to be cautious here. There's a tremendous amount of excitement, very legitimate, very justified about Israel's military prowess in this campaign. I mean, they'll be studying this at West Point for the next 50 to 100 years. It was really quite extraordinary.
Right, and you wrote the definitive book, I should say, about the Six-Day War. I wonder if maybe on the 12-Day War, that might be something coming.
This is potentially even more transformative, really. And, but I caution you, we have to look at the situation not only through Israeli or Western eyes, we have to look at it through Iranian eyes. And I want to give you just the way this could be viewed. The Iranians could say, listen, yeah, we suffered a lot, we were humiliated, we took a lot of hits, but look, we stood up against the world's biggest superpower for 12 days, and its lavishly armed proxy. We reduced the Americans to bombing for one night when they had no real threat there. And when we fired a couple of rockets at Qatar, the president immediately sued for a ceasefire and forced Israel to accept the ceasefire. So we're still there. And the Iranians could think, their regime could think, okay, we can start testing this, start coming back. And it's in their DNA, it's in their raison d'etre. So I think we have to be aware of this. A lot of issues, I go out in the American press a lot, and they're always asking me, were the facilities destroyed? Were they obliterated? How many years were they set back? I think all those questions are irrelevant. There's only two questions that are relevant. Right. One is, what is the motivations of the Iranians? Are they deterred or are they not deterred? And if they are not deterred, what is the United States, what are the United States and Israel prepared to do about it?
All right. We are certainly biblical times, certainly interesting times, as they say. Ambassador Michael Oren, thank you for joining us on ILTV Security Brief.
If you were born before 1979, may I ask you something? Have you ever felt...
As they say, Ambassador Michael Oren, thank you for joining us on ILTV Security Brief. And now,
okay, guys, thank you.
The IDF, this is the best of times and the worst of times. The best of times because with its stunning victory over Iran, the IDF proved again that pound for pound, it is the most effective fighting force in the world, if not in all of history. And it's the worst of times because outside of the military battlefield, the IDF finds itself under a different type of attack at both home and abroad. Externally, it is the target of incitement by anti-Semitic activists who believe a leading chance of death to the IDF is acceptable conduct at music festivals. By some foreign media outlets whose biased and inaccurate reporting of its operations crosses the line into lies and libel. And hypocritical anti-Israel groups and institutions who target IDF soldiers with dubious lawfare legal stratagems applied to no other nation's military. But the threat to the IDF is not just external. Here in Israel, it faces challenges from some far-right extremist elements who challenge its authority and legitimacy as the guardians of Israel's security. It suffers the disrespect of some in the ultra-Orthodox Haredi leadership who agitate against young Israelis, including those from their own community who answer the call to fulfill their military duties as citizens. And it must contend even with some members of the government who fail in their duty to provide the support and backing necessary for the IDF as it faces one of the most challenging periods in its history. Now, there is no need to romanticize the IDF. or for that matter, any military. War is hell, as General Sherman noted, and all armies are necessary evils. But they are necessary as a last resort to fight the real evil in the world. No institution in a democracy is above criticism, including and perhaps especially its military. And when the IDF makes mistakes, it should be held accountable. For those of us who have served in the IDF, who have family and friends who continue to do so, know that as a whole, this true citizens' army represents the best of this country. Its ranks from top to bottom filled with the most outstanding Israelis who continue to serve above and beyond the call of duty, sacrificing the best years of their lives for our common security. Those men and women in uniform, in the face of the unreasonable slander and delegitimization they have been subject to in recent months, deserve the support of all the Israeli public and of all those in the wider Jewish world who care about the future security of the Jewish state, and especially every member of the Israeli government. They have more than earned that with the sacrifices they have made and that they continue to make for the sake of us all. Thank you for joining us on ILTV Security.
Okay, guys. Thank you. See you tomorrow again. I need to end my live now. Thank you for coming. Good night, everyone. So it's more than an hour already. I need to rest. Make a live again. See you later, guys. Thank you.